What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my Big Ten Week 4 power rankings. This week in the Big Ten was pretty crazy. Not a whole lot of movement in my power rankings, although there are a few notable jumps. But rankings pretty much stayed consistent. There are, like I said, a few notable jumps and moves, but you'll see some similarities between this week and next week. It's not been a big jumbled mess like it has been the past couple of weeks, but we do have a new team at the bottom of the list. I just decided between a couple of teams for the bottom of the list, and I ended up going with Michigan State, who drops a spot from 13th all the way to 14th. So they are now last place in the Big Ten after the last place team last week got a win. We'll look at them here in a little bit. Not a good performance at all against Indiana. Didn't even get a point on the board. They got shut out 24-0. Their next game is going to be at Maryland, saying that Maryland can get back on the field. But they're scheduled to play Maryland, and I don't see how they can win that one. I'll preview games more on Thursday. But, I mean, when you look at their stats overall, just not great. Only 15 points per game. 325 yards per game. Those are dead last in the Big Ten. Their defense is better, but the offense cannot hold on to the football. They turn the ball over way too much, and then the defense doesn't force enough turnovers to counteract. This Michigan State team is just an absolute mess, and that one win at Michigan is looking like a fluke. This team has 14 turnovers in 4 games, which I think set a school record or something crazy like that. You never want a team to have that statistics. This Michigan State team is an absolute mess. That is why they are at number 14. Penn State drops 2 spots to number 13 after losing to Nebraska, and they are the last winless team in the Big Ten. I had a hard time deciding between if Michigan State or Penn State should be the worst team in the Big Ten. I ended up going with Michigan State because this Penn State team, they just have more talent to me, and they still haven't looked great. This Penn State team can improve on a lot of things, but the reason I think this Penn State team is 0-4, and I said I'd talk about it a little more today than in my last video, was I think Penn State is demoralized. Now, I know people are going to say, I don't want to hear excuses about injuries. Everyone has injuries, or about opt-outs. Everyone has had opt-outs. When you have a player like Micah Parsons opt out, when you have running back Journey Brown and running back Noah Kane go out, then later learning that running back Journey Brown can't play football anymore, you have a quarterback, an experienced quarterback who's trying to deal with a young, inexperienced team to try to get them to some wins, and the quarterback's not playing. Penn State is just a demoralized team. Now, I know there have been a lot of questionable play calls, lots of questionable time management things. Like, they probably could have won that Indiana game if they would have managed the clock a little bit better, and all of a sudden they wouldn't be sitting at 0-4. It'd be more like 1-3, maybe even 2-2. But this Penn State team is just absolutely demoralized. You look at their stats, in the point per game wise, just not very great ranking wise in the Big Ten, but overall yardage wise, there's some hope still here for Penn State to get a win this season. They do play Iowa next week. Should be a pretty interesting one, but this Penn State team, as demoralized as they are, they got to get a win to boost that morale. Otherwise, they could find themselves lower than 13th. 12 is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They stay number 12 for, I believe, the 3rd week in a row. They do not move after that loss to Illinois. The big reason I didn't move them was because they played great for the first half of the game, but the second half just not all that great. I did see a comment that Rutgers, I thought it was a pretty funny comment, that Rutgers was playing better than the number 5 team I had in the power rankings. This was on the comment or on the video last week, and at number 5 was Purdue. Well, now Rutgers goes and loses to Illinois. Didn't play great in that game at all. When you look at their overall stats and where they rank in the Big Ten, they might be playing some pretty good football, but the stats do not show that they are a solid team. They are 1-3. They get Michigan next week. It should be a fairly interesting one. Honestly, I did not see Rutgers go into the bag of tricks against Illinois. I think in order for Rutgers to be successful, they got to pull a couple fast ones on some teams, and I think Illinois, especially in that second half, was prepared for it. Also, Rutgers played some really, really sloppy football in that second half. Rutgers does have the potential to win a couple more games this year, but they're going to have to play a lot better than they did against Illinois while they are at number 12. And speaking of Illinois, Illinois moves up from last place. They move up 3 spots to 11th, and they get Nebraska next week. Now, still overall, when you look at this team, not great numbers, but I did have to move them up because of their win. That's just how power rankings work. You value a win more than a loss, and you value head-to-head and stuff like that, at least to me. So I put Illinois ahead of Rutgers because of the head-to-head. I don't think this Illinois team is better than Rutgers, but I do see them beating Rutgers. Got to put them ahead because of the win. You're going to see that later in this power rankings as well, which I will explain. But overall, this team capitalized on some great there's some great opportunities in that Rutgers game. It was a very sloppy game towards the end, but they were able to come out on top. They get Nebraska next week, which could be a tricky game for Illinois. Nebraska's coming off their first win of the season at Penn State. And overall, when you look at this team's stats, yeah, they got the win, but overall, still not a solid team. They do get Brandon Peters and their starting freshman tight end back, which is good news for Illinois coming into this game because you want to have those playmakers in order to make some plays for you. But Illinois cannot move higher than 11th. I still need to see this team improve a lot more coming off of that win. At number 10, dropping 1 spot from last week, is the Minnesota Golden Gophers after an embarrassing loss to Iowa 7-35. Just that highly explosive and productive offense couldn't get anything going. And God, I've been saying this for how many weeks now, but Minnesota's defense has got to step up and make some plays, and they haven't. They haven't stepped up. You look at their opponent points per game, worst in the Big Ten with 35.8, almost 36. You look at their opponent yards per game, almost 450 yards per game, which ranks 12th in the Big Ten, but that's not great at all. And when you look at their offense, who's averaging 400 yards per game and almost 30 points, that should be enough to win you a couple games. But Minnesota's defense is just not that great, and especially in this game, the offense could not put up points like the way Iowa could in this game. Now, Iowa's defense is playing really well, but this is a pretty darn good offense with some great playmakers. You'd expect a little more out of Minnesota. I surely expected more out of Minnesota this week, but they lose 35-7. Now, they get Purdue next week. Purdue's coming off a loss to Northwestern that I will talk about later in this video just a little bit as well, but I talked about it a lot more on Sunday. That one could be fairly interesting. It is that Friday night game. Again, I'm going to say it again. I don't know how many more times I need to say it, but this defense needs to step up. Otherwise, they're not going to move very much higher on these power rankings, so they do sit at number 10. At number 9, I have the Michigan Wolverines. They dropped 2 spots after being blown out by Wisconsin, 11-49. That team in Wisconsin just did not seem to miss a beat. And ever since that win week 1 of the season, Michigan has just kind of been trending downwards. They haven't really had a good solid they haven't really had a good solid game since then. Getting really handsy on defense, being called for a lot of pass interference penalties. And I think a lot of people, including some Michigan fans, are looking for replacements for Jim Harbaugh now. That might be a hot take, but there have been a lot of rumors and stuff out there about that. I'm not going to believe anything until it is official, but you got to think that you're starting to get the gears turning a little bit about that. They find themselves 1-3. They're not playing great football in an offense that has potential and a defense that definitely can be good. You look at the overall stats and where they rank in the Big Ten, just not great. Just not great at all. Michigan has just got to step it up everywhere. Now, the reason why Michigan is not lower than this is because if you go all the way back to Rutgers, Illinois had it or had the win over Rutgers, but Minnesota had the win over Illinois, but Michigan has the win over Minnesota. So you can see why they are in the order they are. Honestly, you can shuffle those teams around any way you like. You can have Michigan at 12, Rutgers at 9. I don't really care. 12 through 9 on this list. Mix them up any way you want. They're all 1 and 3. But Michigan is staying at 9 because of the head-to-head, which I value quite a lot. But they've got to play some better football, especially if they want to be a threat to Ohio State later in the season. They still got a pretty interesting game coming up with Penn State. And who thought that Michigan and Penn State would be a combined 1-7 through the first 4 weeks of the season? I surely didn't. I know a lot of you didn't. Going to be interesting to see what Michigan football does the rest of the season. Number 8 is the Nebraska Cornhuskers, moving up 2 spots from where they were last week, a win over Penn State. They improved to 1 and 2. Now, they do get Illinois next week. And they've only played 3 games, so those stats could seem a little outside, but we get a good idea of what this Nebraska team can be. I think this Nebraska offense is better than 20 points per game and definitely better than 370 yards per game with Luke McCaffrey at the helm. Luke McCaffrey was absolutely fantastic in this game. He didn't really even need to do a whole lot. It was more the defense stepping up, but was still put up some pretty solid numbers. It's the defense also that I think Nebraska can improve a little bit. Yes, they made some big plays in this game late down the stretch, but they can still improve quite a bit. Again, they beat a demoralized Penn State team to get their first win of the season, leaving Penn State the only winless team in the Big Ten. Nebraska can gain some momentum with a win this week at Illinois if they're able to pull it off. Nebraska is going to stay here at number 8. I think this team has a lot of potential to maybe even pull off an upset later down the line. We'll see. Number 7 is the Maryland Terrapins. They did not play this week. The game against Ohio State got canceled because of COVID cases in the Maryland program. They do drop a spot, and I will explain why here in a little bit when we take a look at the next team. But they do get Michigan State next week if that game is going to be played. And as of recording this video, nothing has come out saying otherwise. This offense, when you look, one of the hottest offenses and has the potential to be one of the more explosive offenses in all of the Big Ten. But when you look at their defense, 474 yards per game, ouch. 35 points per game, ouch. Not great numbers. Statistically, one of the worst defenses in the Big Ten. They really do need to step that up. Again, that game against Ohio State, if it were to be played, it would have been their defense that would have cost them their game. Especially since I don't believe that Maryland's offense can score enough points to keep with that Ohio State offense. They do get Michigan State this week, who, as of these power rankings, are the worst team in the Big Ten. So we'll have to see how that game plays out if Maryland's able to get back on the field. I hope they're able to get back on the field. This is a really fun team to watch offensively. Defensively, Mike Loxley's group has got some work ahead of them, but I do think that with some work, Maryland can be a pretty solid football team. They find themselves 2-1 after not playing last week. We'll see what they can do from there. They do drop a spot, though, because Iowa has moved up 2 spots, jumping Maryland to the number 6 slot as they are 2-2. Now, I know they have one more loss than Maryland, but honestly, you can flip Iowa and Maryland here. I did put Iowa ahead because of the way that they have been playing in their last 2 games. Just 49 points and 35 points, an average of 42 points in their last 2 games, and allowing an average of 7 points in their last 2 games. Allowed 7 points to Michigan State and 7 points to Minnesota. Now they get Penn State next week, who is the last winless team in the Big Ten. It could be a fairly interesting game. When you look at the way Iowa has played as of late, on paper, this is a pretty easy one to pick. It'd be Iowa. Again, I'll talk about it more on Thursday, but in the top half of the Big Ten in all the major categories you see on here, the one that they can improve the most is that yards per game. Now, they are scoring points because their defense is forcing some turnovers, and statistically, they have one of the better defenses in the Big Ten, not even allowing 15 points per game or 315 yards per game. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this Iowa team lay down the stretch. And while I think this Iowa team maybe has taken a tiny step back from where they've been in years past, they're not far off from being a pretty good team. Iowa is up to number 6. All right, number 5 is the Purdue Boilermakers. I do not move them after that loss to Northwestern. They did fight back in that game against Northwestern, scored some second-half points against the Wildcats. Statistically, when you look at the numbers, it's not great. Again, you could have Iowa jumping Purdue here. I wouldn't mind that, with Purdue being down at 6 or 7. Again, 7 through 5, you can rearrange any way you want. But we now know where Rondale Moore is. He is dealing with a hamstring injury. That is why he has not been on the field, which is understandable. The hamstring injury, usually an injury that takes some time to get back on the field from. But this team is playing some pretty good football. The stats might not show it, but honestly, this team is playing some pretty darn good football. And Purdue is just a lot of fun to watch with Aiden O'Connell, Xander Horvath, David Bell, and soon to be Rondale Moore, we hope. Now they get Minnesota next week on the road. It's going to be interesting to watch that game. 2 very, very good offenses going at it against 2 so-so defenses, although I do think Purdue has the better defense. Again, I'll talk about next week's matchups more on Thursday. But that is going to be an interesting game and an interesting team in Purdue. We'll have to see how they play in later weeks, but I do not punish them too much for the loss to Northwestern, as Northwestern does look pretty good, and Purdue gave them a good fight in that game. They're going to stay at number 5. And also staying at their current ranking is Northwestern at number 4. When you look statistically, one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, 14 points per game. Allowed with just over 300 yards per game allowed. Those are phenomenal numbers. The offense can improve a little bit, but with the defense forcing turnovers and how well they're playing, the offense doesn't have to do a whole lot. Now, they are going to get some tougher and tougher games later down the road. They have to play Wisconsin next week, which that is going to be a very, very interesting game. I don't have too much more to say about Northwestern. This team continued to improve on what they have been doing in weeks past. I don't move them anywhere. They're going to stay here at number 4. But ahead of them is the team that they have to play next week, and that's the Wisconsin Badgers. After they didn't seem to miss a beat, being 2 weeks off, they come back and they absolutely demolish Michigan 49-11. Again, like I just talked about, Wisconsin is going to play Northwestern next week. But statistically, I know they've only played 2 games, so these can be a little daunting as they have, or the stats can be a little misleading as they haven't played a whole lot of games. But 47 points per game, 9 points allowed per game, with 449 yards per game and 218.5 yards per game allowed. This Wisconsin team is an all-around fantastic team. Now, we did not get to see them play Nebraska or Purdue, 2 West competition. That Wisconsin-Purdue game probably would have been really interesting to watch, but they do get a good test next week at Northwestern. Northwestern is a team that is playing some really good football. That's going to be an interesting game. I do not move Wisconsin, though. They're going to stay here at number 3. Number 2, staying where they were, are the Indiana Hoosiers, who moved to 4-0 on the season, their first time being 4-0 in a long time after shutting out Michigan State, the first shutout of this Big Ten season. The defense played exceptionally well in that game, as did the offense. Kind of let up in the second half, not even scoring a point. But they get a difficult one next week at Ohio State, which by now you know who number 1 is, but that game is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I did see the opening line. It was like 21.5, which I thought was insane. I think this Indiana team is still being underrated, and I know they're even in the top 10 in the latest rankings. But I think this team is still being underrated. I think this team has a lot more to give, and I think they're going to pull out all the stops against Ohio State next week. They played a phenomenal game against Michigan State. They hope to carry that momentum next week against the number 1 team in the Big Ten in the Ohio State Buckeyes. Still undefeated at 3-0. Again, their game with Maryland did get canceled and will not be rescheduled. But this team, regardless, still looks like the best overall team in the Big Ten. I know they let up a little bit against Rutgers, and now they have 2 weeks to prepare for this Indiana team, who are just a good team. I just talked about them. They're an undermined team. I think Indiana has a lot more to give, and I think Indiana can push Ohio State to the brink, but Ohio State just is the most talented team overall in the Big Ten. By a long shot, I think their best opportunity to get beat might even be in the Big Ten championship game, and who knows if it's going to be Wisconsin or Northwestern or anyone else that may come out of that Western division. I don't know, but clearly this is still the best overall team in the Big Ten, hands down. All right, that's going to do it for my Big Ten Week 4 Power Rankings. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. Also consider subscribing if you are brand new to the channel, or you just enjoy my content. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload, and you can join Tailgate Nation. Also, can you do 2 things for me? Leave a comment down below. Tell me your thoughts on this video. If it's one thing we can all agree on, it's power rankings. So please feel free to give me your power rankings down in the comments below if you would like. Also, share this video with everyone you know. I'm trying to grow this channel as big as possible. So please feel free to share this video with everyone you know who likes Big Ten football as much as you and me. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys on Thursday with my week preview. Goodbye.